Who let the dogs out? Who? Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of To The Point podcast. Hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful Tuesday, October 18th. And Who Let the Dogs Out is the title of this episode's podcast because the Desert Dogs beat the Toronto Maple Leafs last night. The Broncos, not a dog, but they are something that gets let out of a barn. Who let them out? Well, apparently they're still in the barn because that team's still struggling. We're talking about a lot of bad teams today. We got a lot to get into. NBA preview show today. We're talking hockey to start. We got Monday Night Football. Got some Carson Wentz injury news down in Washington. Bruins Panthers, actually a good game last night we'll talk about. We got a defenseman on a Canadian NHL team that I'm already in love with. Got a crush on him. Love him. He's already in my favorites. Point night for a bunch of different teams in the National Hockey League. And yeah, we just got a lot to dive into today. A lot to dive into on a Tuesday. Seamus is off today. He's doing some training for work. He'll be back next week. The rest of the week, what it's looking like tomorrow, as we usually do on Wednesdays, winners and losers of the NFL week. Touch on some college football. We'll talk about the start of the NBA season tomorrow. We'll do big money later in the week with the gambling picks. Had a good weekend of gambling, college-wise. Always college, you're winning in college. But if you're betting dogs last weekend, like I told you to, you were hitting on most of those, on a lot of winners. So listen to The Point, you can get some good gambling advice. And yeah, just a fun show. A lot to get into today and a couple teams that we got to goof on and I got to talk about because let's start. I got into a rabbit hole last night where I'm watching a bunch of different games. And as you all know, I put out a late podcast last night because I wasn't feeling well Monday morning. And just to be completely straight with you, I haven't been to bed. I haven't slept since Monday at noon. But I'm wide awake. I'm energetic for this podcast. I couldn't sleep last night. Didn't work. And hopefully maybe sleep, maybe not. Who knows? Be up for 48 straight hours. Maybe that's the play. But I'm watching hockey and I'm seeing Maple Leafs Coyotes. And I'm like, again, I've told you guys I don't want to watch every Leaf game. I'm not going to break down every Leaf game this season because there's more teams. There's intrigue elsewhere, and I just find that can be even more interesting to you, the audience, to bring you information on more than just the team that everybody expects to hear from. But I see the Maple Leafs are playing Arizona, the Desert Dogs, Arizona State University Coyotes, and I think to myself, well, I haven't watched a Coyotes game yet. I have to get that off my quota. Have to get through every team. Have to watch at least one game of every team early in the season here. And it's on TV. I got the Bruins Panthers game, a good game, on my computer, but I throw it on. And wowie. I don't know what to say. The big storyline is not the Maple Leaf lost a game. 1 of 82. Talked about this last week. They're going to lose games. Every team does. That doesn't change the fact that they're still a good team. Did they have an embarrassing loss to a team that looks like they're a junior B team? Yeah. People that don't like Toronto can joke about them today and have their fill. Good. Have your fun. Go on your social medias. Good on you. Don't blame you. The more troubling aspect of the Toronto Maple Leafs season to date for me is twofold. Number one, the Toronto Maple Leafs' best players have played like crap. Austin Matthews has been a real ghost in the first 4 games of the season. He's been Mr. Get it to the outside, Mr. I'm going to stick handle out here. I'm not going to get to the middle of the net, middle of the ice, and I'm not going to go hard into corners. I'm going to play a lazy game and hope that I win. Well, he's done that through 4 games. He's 2-2. Way to go. You're 500. But he's played like virtual crap through the first 4 games of the season. The second best player in the world, by some, has looked very pedestrian early in the season. Now, with all that being said, I expect him to turn it around. I expect him to have a great season. I predicted he'd win the Rocket Richard Trophy. But that doesn't change the fact that he's played like virtual crap through the first 4 games. 2 things can be true. Second of all, the Leafs. This team has no urgency whatsoever. This team is either afraid, unwilling, or you could just all wrap it up in a bow, not able to get to the middle of the ice. They could teach a class on stick handling and puck possession 50 feet away from the net. Outside of the face-off dots, they have the puck out there. They make flashy passes, but yet they don't end up even in shot attempts. They don't end up in shots on goal because they controlled time of possession by over 10 minutes in the first period, and they had 5 shots. In the first period, they had the puck the whole time. It ended up creating nothing. They were trailing after the first period. There's no urgency from this team to get to the high danger scoring areas. It's just, okay, we're comfortable out here, which they would be because their team is full of skilled, small, soft players, Kyle Dubas to a T, that aren't willing to get to those areas. Dennis Malgin, newsflash, is not going to get there. So if Dennis Malgin, Pierre Engvall, who's 6'6", built like a giraffe, but is unwilling to go to those areas, which is even more frustrating watching him as a player, he's unwilling. He's a third, fourth line player. He's a fringe NHLer. He's unwilling to do it. And then you have Austin Matthews who says, no, I'm going to hang out here. Then who is? Well, the one guy that really has so far is John Tavares. He's been rewarded for it. He's played good hockey. He's looked as well as he's looked the last number of years for me. Through 4 games, he's played pretty good hockey. Credit to him. But the rest of this team, lackadaisical approach, no compete, no drive to get to high danger scoring areas, and they're just okay losing to the worst team in the NHL. You lose to the 2 worst teams record-wise last season. Arizona and Montreal so far this year. Why? Because they wanted it more than Toronto. Look at the goal by Christian Fischer. It was an ugly goal where Nick Bjugstad worked harder than Morgan Rielly. He wanted the puck more. He got the puck to a high danger scoring area. Christian Fischer scored a dirty goal. But guess what? They all count. That's what I was told when I was about 4 years old. You know that basic. If you know anything about hockey, it's not about how many. It's not about how you got it. It's about how many, right? Get it to the dirty area, score a goal. Toronto won't do this. Unwilling. It's 4 games. It isn't 1. And by the way, it's not a system to get the puck to the front of the net. That's not a system decision. That's not our system. Well, maybe it is in Toronto because they're all built the same way with not a whole lot of this. Not enough of heart. Get the puck in that area. Nick Bjugstad, you know who the Leafs lost to last night? And this, I really thought about how to describe the Arizona Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes are a bunch of orphans. And what I mean by that is Arizona are a team of orphans because they're a team full of players that no other team wanted. That might sound harsh. I get it. People adopt children. You kind of want them. But guess what? The parents originally didn't want you. They got rid of you. Nick Bjugstad, this is on his 3rd or 4th team. We got Nick Ritchie, who was in Toronto last year. Now he's here. He's in Anaheim, was in Boston, 4th team. Troy Stetcher's with his 6th team. Go through that roster. Shane Gostisbehere got traded from Philly to Arizona for cap space. Not a joke. Look up the transcript. Got traded for cap space, meaning nothing. Meaning we just want to get this guy out of our city. You lost to a team of orphans. Why? Because they worked harder in the critical areas than you did. Toronto's a team of skill. They're a team of high dynamic plays. I get it. I've heard it forever. But why do they lose to teams that work harder, that don't have as much skill, and just kind of get to those grunt areas? Because they're a harder working team. They're willing to sacrifice more than the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if this team, we still got a whole lot of games. We got 78 games left. We got a long way to go here. But 78 games are meaningless if you don't learn anything that will help you when we get to April. When it's about compete, when it's about working hard to get to those areas and you're not willing to do it, there's a problem there. The regular season is a dress rehearsal for the postseason. It's getting ready for the postseason, putting yourself in a good position when you get there. I can say this confidently about the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is irrelevant who their opponent is because they've lost to better teams than them and they've lost to a whole lot of teams worse. Columbus, Montreal, Boston that second time around, if you ask me. Why? Because those teams were willing to work harder. Those teams were willing to give a little more than Toronto did. Leaf fans, that might sound harsh. It's not. Really think about it. 78 games left. We're going to see Austin Matthews score a bunch of nice goals. We're going to see William Nylander score a highlight reel goal. We'll see a lot of great things from Toronto. 100-point seasons from a lot of guys. Who knows what happens in net, but it's all going to be hunky-dory. But when you get to the playoffs and you haven't changed, you haven't adapted, your dress rehearsal, this is my life, you need to be ready for that situation. I look at this team, they are a bunch of fucking crazy people because they do the exact same thing every season and expect a different result. If you're trying to lose weight and you don't put any work in, you eat like shit, and you sleep in, you don't train, you don't do anything, you're going to stay overweight. Why? Because you didn't put any work in. You didn't sacrifice. You didn't realize that your life wasn't going the way you wanted it to, and you have to make changes. This isn't a genie from Aladdin where you go talk to Robin Williams and say, hey, I'd like to have this, I'd like to change my life here. Could I have a Christian Bale's body? No, that's not how it works. You got to put the work in. Toronto Maple Leafs look at it and say, we'd like to not work hard to get to the middle of the ice. We'd like to not check, not take big hits, and get to a Stanley Cup final and win. That's not how it works. Is that how Tampa's done it? Is that how Colorado's done it? No. This type of loss should be a warning, a wake-up call that a junior B team filled of orphans beat you last night. One of the worst teams ever assembled beat you. And if the argument is, video review, I hate video review more than anyone. You know that. Toronto, yeah, that goal should have counted in my mind. But I don't care. If you're banking on video review to beat Arizona, you got big fucking problems. Because that means your team stinks. You needed video review to bail you out against that crap squad full of players that nobody wanted? Give me a break. It starts with the top guys. Matthews, how about you go in a corner? How about you get to the middle of the ice? How about you stop flipping around? You want to win a Selke? You want to win the Rock Richard? You want to be the best player in the world? Act like it. Compete like it. Thank God for Nylander and Tavares because they're the only fucking reason the Leafs are winning games early in this year. Period. Because that top line is invisible. I'm not even going to get into the Leafs defense. Because there'll be many games where I'll criticize their defense. That's easy. That's low-hanging fruit. I'll save that material for another day. That's like Chris Rock banking on the material from getting slapped by Will Smith. He's got that in his back pocket whenever he wants to pull it out. I got the Muzzin Hall. I got that story whenever. I got that filed away. I can talk about that tomorrow. I can talk about that 3 weeks from now because you know it's going to happen. Justin Hall, okay, game-winning goal, yeah. My narrative would have been the same whether the Leafs won last night or not. Because wins mask deficiencies. Wins mask problems. It's better for the Toronto Maple Leafs that they lost that game last night. It's better for them that Sheldon Keefe had to call them out again against a really bad team. mean, is Austin Matthews, do you want to go be a Yote? Want to go play at ASU with Christian Fisher and the boys? Shane Gossesbear? Nick Ritchie, who lives rent-free? Have fun. Leafs got Dallas on Thursday. Their top guys show up, compete. Because I know little Joe Pavelski, I know Rupe Hintz, I know Jason Robertson will fight for their ice, will fight for their opportunities. And oh yeah, by the way, Dallas is undefeated. Go beat an undefeated team on Thursday night. Here's an early prediction. Nick Robertson will play Thursday night. Go figure. His first game of the year against his brother. Good story. Sheldon Keefe will put that away from him criticizing the team. It'll be the narrative going in. Way to go, Nick Robertson. Should have made the team out of camp. Who I don't know. They'll probably scratch Dennis Malgin, I'm guessing. I don't know. He'd be the one coming out. He does nothing for the team. He brings nothing to the table. He doesn't have a whole lot of skill, and he's small. I know a guy who doesn't have a whole lot of skill, and he's small. His name's Nick Robertson. So just change one for the other. There you go. That should make a huge difference. But I expect the Robertson battle Thursday night at Scotiabank Arena. Big game Thursday night. Actually, should be good. Actually, that's a decent game. I make fun of those games, but that should be a good game. Dallas is a good team too. I had them making the playoffs. Peter DeBoer undefeated thus far. Team looks good in Dallas. They beat Winnipeg last night. Team looks strong. But Toronto, come on. Come on. Way to go, Arizona. A bunch of orphans beat Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner last night. So kudos to them. Why Ilya Samsonov did not play, don't understand that. But hey, I'm not a head coach. Where do I go next? I have Justin Hall. I'm not going to talk about Justin Hall. Okay. There's a defenseman who plays for a Canadian NHL team that I'm already in love with. And his name is Caden Gooley. Caden Gooley is 20 years old, was in junior last year playing for the Edmonton Oil Kings, made it to the Memorial Cup. Of course, the W didn't win because the W never wins in the Memorial Cup. Us East Coasters just seem to win all the time. Nevertheless, Caden Gooley is playing fantastic there, playing with guys like Jake Neighbors, who scored his first NHL goal the other night for St. Louis. And Caden Gooley made the Montreal team out of camp, 20 years old, young team. I've seen him play his first couple games. I saw him play against Toronto. I watched a little bit of their game against Washington Saturday night. And I can tell you this. Caden Gooley is already one of the best defensemen on the Montreal Canadiens. You might say, well, no other defense stinks. Well, he's going to be their best defenseman by the end of the year, and he's already a difference maker. Why? His physical attributes are already at a professional level. He hits like he's a NHL player, because he is. To me, his skating ability has improved a ton since he was drafted. He's got great hockey sense. And how about last night in Montreal? They're down 2-0 going into the third period against the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has 2 assists on the 2-1 and the game-tying goal. Montreal ends up winning the game in overtime. Caden Gooley was not drafted to be a points guy for the Montreal Canadiens. He was drafted for me to be a shutdown D-man. He's not going to be a Shea Weber because he doesn't have his shot, and Shea Weber is a fringe Hall of Famer. But Caden Gooley can get points at the NHL. I think he's got 3 points already in 4 games on the season. His ability to get the puck out of the zone just easy is already at a high level. We see guys that struggle with it. and they're been in the NHL a long time. And look at Evan Bouchard, who plays for another Canadian defenseman who plays for Edmonton. They struggle. He struggles. It's the weakest part of his game, just getting easy zone exits. Caden Gooley, it's a strength. I love this defenseman. He was drafted 18th overall by the Montreal Canadiens. Oddly enough, the Toronto Maple Leafs could have had him with the 17th pick. They went with Rodion Amirov. Now, Amirov's had some tough times. He was diagnosed with cancer. He's been going through those treatments, but he's also was a small forward, and the Leafs love their small forwards. Toronto could have had a nice defenseman who could move the puck that could really help this team, but here we are. To me, Caden Gooley already looks good. Zerback is going to have to work through things. I'm not sure he plays the entire season at the NHL level. Harris has his issues. David Savard is their stability guy on that Montreal defense. But Caden Gooley already looks like an NHL top team. He's a top 4 easy. I expect him to play all 82 games this season if he's healthy. I expect him to finish to 25 to 30 points, and that's a good rookie season for him. He'll continue to get better, but his confidence and, to me, his stability on the back end is what Montreal needs. Not every guy can be Cale Makar. Not every defenseman can be Quinn Hughes, where you're going to be all offense all the time. You need your just solid, really good defensemen that help you win. Colorado does not win last year without Josh Manson. Caden Gooley, I think, it has more upside than Josh Manson, but Josh Manson was integral to them winning. In my opinion, if they don't trade for Josh Manson at the trade deadline, they're not Stanley Cup champions. He was massive for them. I mentioned Shea Weber on Montreal. He comes to mind. You have certain defensemen that's their skill set. That's what they do efficiently, and they're just building blocks. They chew minutes for you, and you find a way to win. My comp to Caden Gooley, in a sense, is Chris Pronger. And Chris Pronger won a Hart. He won, the Norris in the same season. But Caden Gooley's got a nasty streak like Chris Pronger, where if Caden Gooley takes a hit on a shift, he will take that number and he won't forget it. Chris Pronger was famous for this. You hit him, you did something dirty, he would get you back, but he would get you back worse. Caden Gooley he can line up guys and throw really good body checks, and they're clean. He does it extremely well. Again, I love what he's done early in this season. He'll have his up and downs, of course. He's a young defenseman. He's got to work through, adjusting to the NHL. But through 4 games, through the preseason where he was really good, he hasn't looked out of place whatsoever, and he's looked completely comfortable like a first-round pick should. Montreal has a good one. And that's something they can look at and say, we got Nick Suzuki, who I'm not sure I don't think Nick Suzuki's a number 1 center. They might hope he is, like a Patrice Bergeron, but those don't just fall off the tree. But we got Suzuki, number 2 center. We got Caulfield, who maybe is a top-line winger. Not sold. Kirby Dach, we still got to wait and see. Gets his first goal as a Montreal Canadien last night in overtime. But we have some building blocks. We got to get rid of some pieces. But if we have a guy in the back end, we have a number 2 center. We have a top-line winger. Maybe Zerback can break in and become a defenseman that will be on this D-core for a long time. And I still think they believe Caden Primo could be that goaltender of the future. Carey Price's career is over. Jake Allen is a placeholder. Montreal could have some pieces. But you got to give credit where credit's due. They beat Pittsburgh and they beat Toronto in their first 4 games. Good for them. 2-0 down last night, they come back to win. They beat Pittsburgh, where Crosby was right there with Matthew Tkachuk, like I said yesterday, as the best player in the NHL and early in this season. That's impressive. So good on Montreal for having the fight, not quitting, and find a way to win that game at Centre Bell last evening. Boston, Florida. This was the good game of the evening that I watched because both these teams are similar, where Boston has skilled players, Marchand, my guy David Pastrnak, Bergeron in a sense, but their skill is secondary to their work ethic. They are the anti-Toronto. Wonder why Boston won all those series. But they have a work ethic, they have this ability, they grind, and they just find a way to be competitive. The Florida Panthers had Huberdeau, had Weegar, but their team has shifted, as I've talked about. I've watched all three of their games so far, and Florida is very much a hard-working team. They listened to my advice. They got two defensemen off their top power play unit, so thank you, Florida. It's driving me crazy watching you. Patrick Hornquist joined the top power play unit. But you got Hornquist, you got Luosterainen, you got Lundell, you have Sam Bennett. You have a team full of lunch pail guys that have skill, but it's not their primary function. It's not how you got to this point. Well, you saw last night where a couple things. One thing about Florida that I love about their forward group, they finish every check, which is so rare in today's NHL, and they put great pressure on your opposing team's defense. They don't let you hold the puck long. They force you to make a decision, and oftentimes it can be the wrong one. It ends up in having massive, time control with the puck. It happened last night where Derek Forbort had it. He had some puck pressure. He had to get rid of it, went up the board to Matthew Tkachuk. Tkachuk put a great shot pass on the ice. Sam Bennett got a stick on it, and it was a tie ball game. So Florida's got some deficiencies. Their goaltending still needs to work itself out. Goalie Bob and Spencer Knight both have been pretty shaky to start their season. Mark Stahl looks like he's about another game away from being in the retirement home. It's ugly for Mark. He's getting burned seemingly every game. Last night was by David Pastrnak. So their defense still scares the hell out of me in Florida, where Gustav Forsling is asked to be the number 2 defenseman. And you have Mark Stahl out there with Gudis, who is a 5'6". Mark Stahl is a 5'6", but you got to play one of them in higher minutes. So Florida has deficiencies. It's their back end, and you could argue their high-end skill, but I still think they'll be able to work that out. For Boston, they've won every game so far this season. They've beaten some pretty decent teams. They beat Florida last night. They opened against Washington. And I forget their other game. It's not coming to mind, but they're 3-0 to start the season. That's all you need to know. And I look at Boston, and I see an X factor on this team because Marchand's not playing yet, and McAvoy aren't playing. Two of the biggest pieces of their team. You still have Pastrnak. Their goaltending, they have one of the better tandems in the NHL with Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. And you have, Krejci. I was hard on that signing. He's been very effective so far. So that's ... so far. I don't have a whole lot of faith in David Krejci being a productive player later in the season. He's an old man. We'll see what he can do. But he made a great play last night on a goal where he worked the guy off the puck. He got the puck back to the point. They got a shot off. Screen hit a body in front, goes in the back of the net. He deserves credit for that goal. He created the opportunity. For Boston, the X factor for this team on having a great season and ultimately being a playoff guy, because that's where he's had his most success, to me, is Jake DeBrusk. Jake DeBrusk had 2 goals last night, but you can forget about Jake DeBrusk because he's had so much swarming around him the last number of years. He demanded a trade. He's gone through injuries. He re-signed, and then he's had problems with Bruce Cassidy. He's been a healthy scratch. It has not been the easiest relationship between the Boston Bruins and Jake DeBrusk. However, there's no denying that Jake DeBrusk is a very useful player. He's a guy that plays with edge. He's a guy that has a great wrister and has great just frontline speed. He's skating downhill. He can flat out fly. He can burn you. The reason I say Jake DeBrusk is an X factor, and I put before it a motivated Jake DeBrusk. Couple things. Bruce Cassidy is coaching the Vegas Golden Knights, and Vegas is having early season success. Good for Vegas. But to me, Jake DeBrusk getting out from under Bruce Cassidy, I think Bruce Cassidy is a good coach, but just having a new voice in Jim Montgomery is a breath of fresh air for him. New opportunity. He knows, I think he's got a longer leash. He's got a new coach that is going to give him every opportunity to succeed. And just a fresh, and he goes into work every day and he just feels better about the situation than he did with Bruce Cassidy behind the bench. So that's number one. But he's got a great wrister. He's going to have great line mates the whole season. That's guaranteed. Okay, you're either going to play with Krejci and Hall, or you can be on a line with Pastrnak. You're going to have really talented people around you, period. That's a guarantee when you're on the Boston Bruins. You're going to be in a competitive team with good players around you. I could see Jake DeBrusk scoring 30 to 35 goals this season for the Boston Bruins. Maybe he doesn't even get to 30, but to me, he can get there because this team is going to need it. AJ Greer scored goals early to start the year. They have Thomas Nosek, hanging around. They have guys that aren't exactly game changers in the bottom of their lineup. But to me, Jake DeBrusk can be a better player than Taylor Hall on a given night. Jake DeBrusk can Krejci is still a great passer, and Jake DeBrusk can finish some of those attempts. And being in the right spot at the right time is critical as well. A new season, a new coach, just a new wave for Jake DeBrusk in his NHL career. When you look at the top of the Atlantic, you assume Tampa is going to be competitive. They're 1-2 to start the season. They're playing Philly tonight. But we expect Tampa to compete for a playoff spot. I expect Toronto, obviously, to compete for a playoff spot, despite what happened last night. Florida, Boston beats Florida last night, 5-3. And that's an impressive victory for the Bruins. But I expect Florida to be in the mix. Boston should be able to compete for a top 3 spot. And sometimes it's just about circumstance. Tampa's banged up. Yes, just like Boston early in the season, there's no Marchand, there's no McAvoy. But I look at it and I think Tampa's more fatigued than Boston. Boston's been out in the first round the last number of seasons. They should be fresh. And they should be motivated. Jake DeBrusk should be motivated to have a big season. I think this is Patrice Bergeron's last year in the league. I think this team should be motivated to win games for him, try to win a Stanley Cup in his last hurrah. I doubt that they can accomplish it, but that should be their goal. David Pasternak's last season on his contract. Is he staying in Boston? I don't know. I have my doubts, but do I think this team wants to compete and try to win this year? Yeah. Sometimes it's about motivation in the regular season and what you have to play for. This team, I think, should be more motivated than a Tampa team. They may be more motivated than a Toronto team. Fighting for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic is not out of the equation for the Boston Bruins. They have a good team. They do. And I like the way they played the first couple games. They're in Ottawa tonight for a back-to-back. But the best thing you can say about the Boston Bruins on a back-to-back is you got Swayman or you got Allmark. For Tampa, you got to go to Brian Elliott. That's not a good transition. Go from Vasilevsky to Brian Elliott. Toronto, you got to go to Eric Källgren right now. It's not as good. Florida, Spencer Knight, he's really inconsistent. Again, it's a pretty good situation, but I think Boston's consistently is better at this point. I could go through the rest of the division. Ottawa doesn't have a backup goaltender right now. They had to claim him off waivers because Cam Talbot's hurt. Boston looks good. They have some really good mojo about them right now, and they have an advantage over other teams in that they have something to play for in a real way, and they have a goaltender on any given night that can match with theirs. So kudos to them. They got Ottawa tonight. Ottawa's home opener. And Ottawa, you're hearing good reports that they sold 70% more season tickets this season than they did last year. Based on, the team just adding in the offseason, the team should be more competitive. Tonight's a really important game for the Ottawa Senators. You don't want to start 0-3. You don't want to start 0-3. Every season, the last number of years, they've had a rough start. It's hard to overcome in your division. You can overcome it if you're in the Pacific, where teams just aren't that good. Find a way. You need to find a way to win tonight. Boston's on a back-to-back. They had to travel to get in Ottawa after they played a tough Florida team last night. It'll be Jeremy Swayman in the net tonight. But for Ottawa, they've had leads in their first two games. They scored the first goal against the Buffalo Sabres, and they scored the first goal against Toronto Maple Leafs, and they lost both of those hockey games. Finding the ability to win is important. You can't go 0-3. As little as 3 games are, it's just about mentality with some teams, and this team hasn't had the mentality of overcoming slow starts. They haven't been able to find it, and it snowballs into a way bigger issue. Huge game for Ottawa tonight, even though it's only their third game. Having the right mentality, having confidence from a team that hasn't had a whole lot over the last number of years is imperative. Before we get to the point night last night from a number of guys in the National Hockey League, we have such an intriguing game tonight. And I don't think many teams have this game circled, but I do. It is the Panic-A-Rama, I'm calling it. The Panic-A-Rama is when two teams play each other. And it's a game where whoever loses is going to be under mass panic, mass hysteria. And that is the Panic-A-Rama, and we have it tonight. Here's the hint. The game's at 8 o'clock start time here in Atlantic, Canada. It features a Western Conference team and an Eastern Conference team. And both of these teams haven't won a game yet. Well, survey answers are on the board, and if you answered the Vancouver Canucks and the Columbus Blue Jackets, ding, 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 you're right. The Vancouver Canucks are 0-3. They have lost to the Edmonton Oilers. They lost in Philly on Saturday after having a 2-0 lead, and they lost to the Washington Capitals last night in the nation's capital. 0-3. The Columbus Blue Jackets have lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They've also lost to the Philadelphia Flyers. And their last game was against the St. Louis Blues, where they were blown out. Columbus is 0-3. They've already lost Patrick Laine to injury. Their goaltending's inadequate. Their Larson, the head coach, is freaking out. And what happened last night in Vancouver? Oh, yeah, they had a players-only meeting. JT Miller is freaking out in the media. Bruce Boudreau saying the team just isn't competitive right now. They're not competing. My God, it's panic in Van City. The Panic-A-Rama. This game is so tasty to me. This game will be in the rotation tonight. A lot to watch tonight. There's some good games across many sports. But this game is just coming to me because it's one team is guaranteed to be 0-4. It's guaranteed. It's not, okay, one team will be 0-4 tonight. 0-3-1 is still 0-4 to me because guess what? You have no wins. That means you went through 4 games, no wins. I don't care about the 1 point. Columbus lost Patrick Laine. Vancouver, Thatcher Demko can't stop a beach ball right now. They got Alex Ovechkin got off the schneid last night against the Canucks. Their defensive play is horrible. Who could have guessed that? Luke Schenn, Tyler Myers, Kyle Burrows. You're telling me these guys aren't defending well? God, that's hard to believe. You're telling me Brock Besser's taking penalties 35 seconds into a game? No, not Brock Besser. He's a smart hockey player. He's got a great shot. That's about it. Johnny Gaudreau has been pretty quiet. He doesn't have the guy on the wing that he can score goals to. Two teams that were hoping to be better than they were the year before. Columbus did it with free agents. I talked about Columbus last week and how they're up against the salary cap, and yet their team still stinks. How their team still has so many issues. Patrick Laine's now hurt. They signed him long-term. Good for Patrick for locking that up. Johnny Gaudreau is playing with who knows. Alexander Tessier left the team to go play in Switzerland. My God. It's mass hysteria in Columbus for all the 5 people that care. In Vancouver, there are many people that care. There's a lot of Vancouver Canucks fans. Vancouver starts 0-4. That would equal them with the San Jose Sharks, who are also 0-4. The Sharks, who stink. The Sharks, who I predicted would have the second worst record in the NHL. Yes, the Sharks. You do not want to be in any category with the Sharks. Brucey Boudreau will not be fired tonight if they lose, but I'll tell you, seat's going to be hot in Vancouver. Because you have a whole lot of expectations on a team that isn't that good, but there's still expectations. Because you play in Canada, and you're in a Canadian market, and people expect you to be good even when your team is crap. It's the way it works. That's the job. You got to sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. It's a tough predicament. Big Tom Callahan was able to do it. Tommy boy. Can the Vancouver Canucks do it in this season in the National Hockey League with a defense that isn't that good, with some players that are just frankly stupid, and Connor Garland and Brock Besser, filled with some good talent with Elias Pettersson, who also can take stupid penalties? Here's a recommendation for Vancouver. Don't take penalties. Through 3 games, they've allowed 7 power play goals, including one Alex Ovechkin less than a minute into the game last night. Way to go, Brock Besser. The Panic-A-Rama tonight, 8 p.m., Columbus, Ohio. Be there or be square. I will be watching. Because why not? And we'll talk about this game tomorrow. Because one team, as I pointed out, is guaranteed to be 0-4. It's a guarantee. Who will it be? We'll see. Also last night, huge point night across the NHL for a number of guys. Alex Ovechkin had a 4-point night, scored his first 2 goals of the season, as I just mentioned. Mika Zibanejad had a 4-point night for the Rangers as they doubled up the Ducks 6-4. Mason Marchment had another point. He's had 2 multi-point games already as a Dallas Star. Valerie Nichushkin and the Colorado Avalanche beat the Minnesota Wild 6-3. McKinnon had 3 points. Nichushkin's got 4 goals in his first 3 games. And Minnesota's another 0-3 team. Minnesota can't stop a puck right now. Marc-Andre Fleury has been injured, or he's got something wrong with him to start the year. Something's up with him. They're 0-3 in Minnesota despite Kirill Kaprizov and Keelan Addison playing fantastic. Panic in Minnesota. Bill Guerin, what's going on in Minnesota? Again, it happens. Tonight in the NHL, what we got? I mentioned we got Boston, the Panic-A-Rama game. Buffalo Sabres are in Edmonton tonight. Sabres, the team that I have pegged to watch a lot of games of this year. I'll be checking in on the Sabres playing Edmonton tonight. We got Vegas and Calgary. That should be an interesting game out on the West Coast. Islanders and Ducks in a game tonight. So some interesting action in the NHL this evening. Also, this afternoon, Evgeny Kuznetsov of the Washington Capitals was suspended for 1 game for a high sticking play in their game against the Vancouver Canucks last night. So he will sit out Thursday's game when they visit the Ottawa Senators. He'll be suspended for that game. Selfish play. It was a high stick. It did look malicious. So Again, one game, I'm fine with that for Evgeny Kuznetsov. He's had some problems with the league before. I'm a little surprised it wasn't more than one game. I'm cool with one game, but just with his history, he doesn't have the greatest rap with the league. He's had some problems with the in the past, and some other suspensions, some other issues. So we'll see. But yeah, Evgeny Kuznetsov will miss the Washington Capitals next game. Yeah, no, good start to the NHL season. Some good games tonight. Kraken lost to Carolina. Carolina's 3-0. I didn't think they'd be this good. They're off to a great start. Svechnikov's red hot. Aho's getting points. Frederik Andersen starting games, which is even more startling. They might be better than I thought they were in the Metro. They played some bad teams so far, I will say that, but they're winning. So good on Carolina. I should have known. I mean, you got Rob Brendamore coaching that team. They're going to play hard every night. They're going to give it their all. They're going to have a good structured approach. I didn't love all their additions in the trade in the offseason, but so far so good for Carolina as they go through a West Coast road trip. They got some games later the week against the Edmonton Oilers, and they also played the Calgary Flames on Saturday. Pivoting to baseball quickly. Today we got two playoff games. At 5 p.m. we got Game 5 Guardians-Yankees. Game was rained out last night, so Game 5 goes today. Nestor Cortez will now be starting for the Yankees. Aaron Savali will be starting for the Guardians. Shane Bieber's not able to get ready in time. So finally this series ends. The winner of today's game will then have to travel to Houston directly following the game. And Game 1 in Houston is tomorrow of the American League Championship Series. I mean, this is a game to move on. I expect both teams to use whoever they have available. It's already been reported that Garrett Cole, who pitched 7 innings in Game 4, could be available to close out the series if they need him today for the Yankees, which if you have to use him, use him. They don't have a closer right now. It's closer by committee for the Yankees with Clay Holmes, with Wandy Peralta. So look for them to do that. For the Guardians, I think Bieber could be available out of the bullpen too if they really need him. They have Karinchak. They have guys that they like to use out of the bullpen. But I look at today's game, the two big players to me, Jose Ramirez is the life force. He is the leader of the Cleveland Guardians. He's their best player. He needs to have a day if they're going to win. Josh Naylor's had a good series. He looks dinged up to me, but Jose Ramirez is the most important player offensively and defensively for the Cleveland Guardians. For the Yankees, I mean, they have a bunch of guys that could step up in this game. But, I mean, you got Aaron Judge, who's been their guy all season long. Harrison Bader has 3 home runs in the postseason. He's been fantastic. He was a deadline acquisition from the St. Louis Cardinals. I look at the Yankees today. If somebody's going to step up with the bat, and I had to predict who it's going to be. I mean, they have a lot of versatile players. They have a lot of guys that can get hits. I'm going to go with Gleyber Torres to have a big game today for the New York Yankees if they advance. He's been batting leadoff, which I hate also. I don't think he should be batting leadoff. But they have Aaron Judge batting second, which I don't love either. So again, the Yankees, I'll tell you, baseball is praying for a Yankee victory because that National League Championship Series is not what they were hoping for. Neither team they wanted to win won. They'll never admit that. But ratings, what people want to see, people did not want to see the series between Phillies and Padres. But that's what we got. Speaking of that series, Game 1 of that series goes this evening. It'll be Zach Wheeler for the Phillies pitching against Yu Darvish for the Padres. Game 2, already announced, it is tomorrow, 5:35 first pitch. It'll be Aaron Nola for the Phillies, who's 2-0 in the postseason, against Blake Snell, who's also pitched extremely well for the San Diego Padres. I look at this series, pitching on both sides has been fantastic. Darvish can be up and down, but Zach Wheeler's been extremely good for the Phillies. You got for You also got Aaron Nola has been good. They got Ranger Suarez. Both these teams are deep when it comes to starting pitching and what they can do with it. Bats, the Phillies just have a really balanced lineup. You have Rhys Hoskins, you have Schwarber who can hit a dinger at any time. Gene Segura at the bottom of that lineup has been getting hit after hit. I like the Phillies team when it just comes to how they approach it. They also have Bryce Harper. So you have a superstar in Bryce Harper. You have a superstar in Manny Machado. You could argue, Juan Soto is another superstar on the Padres. So more superstars there. But oddly enough, I think the pitching's a little bit better for the Phillies. I look at Mike Clevinger. I don't trust him. I love his look. I mentioned the hair, the tattoos. I'm kind of channeling my inner Mike Clevinger today. Got the nice curls going on in the back. But I think the Phillies pitching is a little bit better. I got the Phillies in 6. I've already put the bet down. I put the games also. Phillies have home field advantage. In the best of 7, it goes 2-3-2. So 2 in Philadelphia, then 3 in San Diego, back 2 in Philadelphia. So they play today, tomorrow, off day Thursday, and they play 3 straight on the weekend in San Diego. I think it's going to be really good baseball. That's all I know for sure that we're going to see. I think the series is going to be extremely competitive. To me, Manny Machado is playing like a man possessed. He just beat the Dodgers, the team that he hates, the team that hates him. He got by them. And he was arguably the best player on the Padres during that series, other than Jake Cronenworth, who is my guy. But I just look at the Phillies to me, and they're a team of destiny. They have something about them. I mentioned the 0-3 Marlins, and I'm buying into that. They're pitching. They fired a manager. They shouldn't be in this situation, yet they are. Yet they are. Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber. It's a team built from free agency. Normally teams don't win this way. And maybe they won't win this season, but they might. I think they'll get to the World Series. And they'll take their chances against either the Guardians, the Yankees, or the Houston Astros, the heavy favorite. In tonight's games, I got the Phillies winning Game 1 behind Zach Wheeler, having a really good start. I think Yu Darvish will go 5 or 6 innings, but I think he gives up 3 earned. I think Zach Wheeler goes 6 or 7 tonight, has a really good start. The Guardians winning would be fascinating because I like Terry Francona. He's a really good manager. He's won a World Series with the Boston Red Sox. And the Guardians have a very small payroll. They trade away Francisco Lindor. They trade away pieces at the beginning of the year because they weren't supposed to be good, but they ended up backing their way into winning the American League Central. The Yankees are too good. The Yankees have too many mashers. The Yankees have too many good pitchers for the Guardians to overcome it. When you're playing the Guardians, you get 3 runs, you normally win the game. I think the Yankees win tonight 5-2, and it'll be Yankees-Astros in the American League Champion Series again, which will be interesting. That's for sure. Yankees pitching won't be set the way they want it, but them's the breaks. You'll have to go into it, figure it out on the fly. Severino will throw guys out there and see what sticks. But I got the Yankees winning tonight in the first game, and I got the Phillies winning Game 1 of the NLCS. We'll break this down day by day here in the podcast as we move forward. Now, before we get to our NBA preview, let's get to Monday Night Football. When you hear the thought, well, when this team plays, there's always a close game. That's normally a really good thought. That's normally a really good thing. You're like, well, that'll be entertaining. That's good to hear. Unless you're talking about the Denver Broncos, because in this case, the Denver Broncos are always involved in close games that are almost unwatchable. The Denver Broncos have already played twice on Monday Night Football. They played Sunday Night Football, and they played a Thursday night game. And in 2 weeks, they play in London, England, in what you could say is a prime time stand-alone game. And in that time, the Denver Broncos have not scored more than 22 points in one game. The Denver Broncos have lost to the Indianapolis Colts by a score of 12-9. They've lost to the Seattle Seahawks by a score of 17-16. And they lost last night to the Los Angeles Chargers 16-13. Last night's game was so fundamentally poor. Last night's game was so painful because you wanted to go to bed, but you didn't. You stayed up because, I couldn't sleep anyways. What the hell am I going to do? But if you were a rational person, you worked today, you had to get up early, you probably thought, I don't want to watch the rest of this game. If you're a Leaf fan, you just saw the Desert Dogs beat your team, you're in a state of depression, you want to sleep so you can forget about it. But if you were with me the whole way through and you watched this whole Broncos-Chargers game, and you look at what happened, it was an ugly, ugly, sad state of affairs last night. The Los Angeles Chargers had 148 yards in penalties last night. They won the game. 148 yards. Justin Herbert threw 57 passes last night. He did not throw a touchdown pass. That is a new record for most passes thrown in an NFL game without throwing a touchdown pass. And the Chargers still won the game. Chargers did not have Rashawn Slater, their all-pro left tackle. The Chargers did not have Corey Linsley, a Pro Bowl center. They won the game. Broncos sacked Justin Herbert 4 times. They still won the game. Why did they win? It wasn't because Justin Herbert played well. He played horrible last night. No continuity, bad decision-making, and the Chargers have a bonehead for a coach by the name of Brandon Staley, who makes bad decision after bad decision, and it's quite perplexing. It's not just fourth downs anymore. It's when to take a timeout. It's when to make a decision. It's when to call a play. None of it makes sense. Watching Nathaniel Hackett and Brandon Staley on the sidelines last night was like watching two donkeys run into each other. Just two battering rams just hitting each other. You know you're not going to have any benefit. You're just running into each other with no escape, no thought of the future, because neither of them were smart enough to think about what was next. It looked as if the coaching was, okay, we're going to run a third down play. What do we do after it? They didn't even think about it. They're like, I don't know what to do. It's a stone face. What do we do in this situation? I don't know. Denver had a 10-0 lead in the first quarter. Russell Wilson had his best drive of the season. He was on the run. He made some big throws, and it looked as though Denver had some momentum. Russell Wilson had 90 passing yards after the first quarter. He finished the game, and this game went into overtime with 2 minutes left in overtime, I'll add, and he finished the game with 188. Nothing. No continuity, no connection with anyone, just horrible football. Denver had a 13-10 lead at the half. I look at Russell Wilson. You hear about he's got a lat injury, and then Nathaniel Hackett said he hurt his hamstring last night on Monday Night Football. Sure. Physically, he's probably hurting right now. I get it. Who isn't? You see all the injuries across the NFL. I just mentioned the slew of injuries to the Chargers offensive line, which is severely hurting their offense, but Justin Herbert's hurting as well at times. I see Russell Wilson's brain failing him just as much as his body is. He's missing easy reads all the time. He's got a guy open for a check down, but he'll check away from him. He'll throw the ball out of bounds. He'll decide to scramble, and it just isn't a good decision. Not to mention Denver. This was a stat last night. In overtime, they possessed the ball twice, and they had the opportunity to possess it a third time. The two possessions they had it, both 3 and outs, which is incredible. They went run first down, run second down, third down, pass. Same formula. They are predictable. They don't change it up. And it's incredibly easy for defenses to figure out what they want to do. 2, 3 and outs, but also they had an opportunity to win the game again because they had the ball to start overtime. They won the coin toss, 3 and out. They gave the ball to the Chargers, 3 and out. Back to Denver, 3 and out. Back to the Chargers, 3 and out. But Chargers punt the ball away. Muff punt by the returner for Denver, recovered by the Chargers, ends up with Dustin Hopkins kicking a game-winning field goal, even though he had some kind of injury to his leg. Kickers, my God. This Broncos team had timeouts last night where they called a timeout on a third down, and they didn't know how to read a blitz pickup. Cal Tranquil busted through, just blew up Russell Wilson, got a sack. Didn't know how to pick up a blitz pickup. He has no connection with Jerry Jeudy, Russell Wilson, whatsoever. Those two guys are not on the same page. They benched Melvin Gordon. They activated Latavius Murray from the practice squad. He had more carries than Melvin Gordon. Russ didn't turn the ball over. Justin Herbert did, and yet the Chargers still won this game. And the Chargers are 4-2 somehow. There's so much bad football in the NFL right now, it's honestly crazy. So much bad decision-making, so much bad coaching that would make you just scream. I love the sport. I'm going to continue watching it. But I saw this today on Twitter. In Week 7, there is one game featuring 2 teams with winning records. And that is the AFC South battle between the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. If you can believe that. 49ers they're 3-3. They play the Chiefs. The Bears play the Patriots this weekend. Dolphins and Steelers, 2 teams that don't have winning records. So many teams are 3-3. That can be interesting, but it can also be there's crap out there. A lot of crap. Chargers have a winning record in this league. They're tied with the Chiefs, and yet they look so pathetic doing it. They have the Seahawks next week, the Chargers. It's no gimme. Every Chargers home game is the opposing team's home game, really. It's a road game for them because they don't get any crowds. It's not a football city, so to speak, and they're more Ram fans than Chargers fans. Should have never left San Diego, but that's another story for another day. Justin Herbert needs Keenan Allen back. Justin Herbert needs to be willing to check down passes to Austin Eckler. Justin Herbert needs to throw the ball to Mike Williams a little bit. Because other than Mike Williams, Josh Palmer is not getting open. He's Canadian, he's a receiver. I get it. He's not a very good receiver. Their depth at receiver is extremely thin. You have a quarterback that's got an arm as big as anybody in the league. He doesn't have a deep threat. He doesn't have a deep threat. And here's a thought for the Chargers. And maybe this guy is past his prime. Well, he is. But what I do know about this player who is available, he's fast. If I'm the Los Angeles Chargers, I am calling Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson's a polarizing player. He's played with the Eagles. He's played with the football team. He's played with the Cowboys. He's played with the Rams. I've been everywhere, man. That's Deshaun Jackson. But what I do know about Deshaun Jackson is he can run a run down the field as fast as he can, and get a deep ball. I saw him do it with the Rams last year. He's unsigned. He's available. Give him a call. This offense needs some sort of a boost. It needs a jolt. It needs something, because that was awful last night. And maybe when you play Denver, you get sucked into that vortex of pathetic play. But I don't know with the Chargers last night. That was as ugly as it gets. I've never seen Justin Herbert have that kind of a game as a pro. He looked unsure the entire game. He just didn't make great decisions. Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert were competing to see who could play worse last night. The coaches were competing to see who can be dumber, who can make the worst possible decision. Denver's 2-4, and Russell Wilson's all banged up to hell now. You know Russell Wilson won't miss a start. Hamstring, he's got other injuries. He won't miss the start, but yet all these reports come out about his injuries. Why are those being brought out? To defend him? To make the Broncos feel better about the fact that they gave him $200+ million and he's not worth the investment? All I know is the Broncos got the Jets this week. The Jets, the hottest team in the NFL. And yes, the Broncos are at home. It's no gimme. No gimme even in Mile High. Because the Broncos do have a good defense on paper, but there's also the fact that DeMar Mathis, who is a corner because they have a corner out with injury, he played last night. He had 4 pass interference calls. Also, their defense last night for Denver allowed 7 first downs via penalty. They had 87 yards in penalties, but it made it look good because the Chargers had 148. And yet both teams only 16-13 the total points last night. Just sloppy football all around. This coming Sunday is not the holy grail of NFL football. If you're going to miss a week, which I would never recommend, but if you're going to do it, it would be this weekend. Because you just have a bunch of teams that we still got to figure out. I mean, Bucks-Panthers is not a great game. Lions-Cowboys on paper is not a great game. I think that game might be a sneaky good one. Dak coming back should be interesting. But you got Philadelphia Eagles are on a bye. Minnesota Vikings are on a bye. I mean, this week you got Raiders, Texans. Both teams have 1 win. Cincinnati, Atlanta is a sneaky good game to me. Both teams 3-3 again. 2 teams that don't have winning records. I don't know. The NFL, after 6 weeks, is in an extremely weird place. The Packers are only a 7-point favorite against the Washington Commanders. The Packers. They'd normally be a 10 to 12-point favorite against the Washington Commanders. And the Commanders are without Carson Wentz because he just had finger surgery. The Washington Commanders announced today that Taylor Heineke will be their starting quarterback this weekend against the Green Bay Packers, who they will host. Ron Rivera is a head coach there, and he's making decisions that are trying to get him wins because he wants to keep his job. He's not going to. Ron Rivera will be fired at the end of the year because this team's going to miss the playoffs, and Danny Snyder will fire the coach because he wants to be competitive, even though he's the worst owner in sports, and that team has won 2 playoff games in the entirety of his ownership, which is over 20 years. Sam Howell, they drafted in the 5th round out of the University of North Carolina. I would be starting Sam Howell. You know what this team is in Washington. You have 3 other teams in your division. They are all better than you. You are 2-4. And you've beaten the 2-4 Jags, and you've beaten the sorry Bears, who might be 2-4, but they are 0-6 on paper. They are to me, they're the worst team in the NFL. And yeah, you might have the same record as them right now, but that's who you've beaten on your schedule. See what you have in Sam Howell. You still have receivers. He's not going to be completely left out to dry. Get your receiving core out there. See if your defense can play. Maybe something happens. But your team is going to be picking in the top 10 in this draft. Do you have is Sam Howell your quarterback of the future? Or are you going to be drafting one in this quarterback-heavy draft with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young and Will Levis? Potentially Sam Hartman. You could have 4 to 5 quarterbacks go in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. Is Sam Howell going to be the guy that you rely on going into the future? You know that Taylor Heinicke is not that guy. Why start him? This is when ownership has to overrule a coach. But maybe Danny Boy will, but Taylor Heinicke was announced as the starter today. Not the decision I would have made. I get it from Ron Rivera. He's fighting for his job. He's fighting for his career. He won't be the head coach of the Washington Commanders next season. Because this team is not making the playoffs. Next game's Thursday night. We got Saints-Cardinals. Could be interesting. 2-4 teams. New Orleans right now is Jameis Winston hasn't played in a number of weeks. Andy Dalton got hurt from over the weekend. Taysom Hill might have to start at quarterback for this team. Wouldn't that be fun again? That experiment comes back to life. The Saints, who are a Super Bowl favorite, the Cardinals, who just completely can't get it. I'm actually looking forward to that game. But tomorrow on the show, we will be doing week 6, winners and losers in the NFL of this week. We'll talk about that tomorrow amongst a whole bunch of other things, but that is on tap tomorrow, as we always do on a Wednesday. However, tonight we have another sport starting up. The National Basketball Association tips off tonight with a pair of games on TNT. The Boston Celtics host the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Golden State Warriors host the Los Angeles Lakers. I like that both teams that were in the finals last year are playing tonight. That's the way it should be. Both games are on TNT, where TNT just announced that they're Inside the NBA pre- and post-game show, which is the best in sports, with Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet. Shaq and Kenny Johnson has re-signed long-term extensions with TNT, so I'm happy to hear that. But this NBA season is interesting for a number of reasons. You have a number of teams. The East, I think, is full of contenders to me, full of really good teams, and the West is different, and I'll get into why. Huge additions this offseason for teams. I'm going to start with Boston, who made it last season. They're without additions and subtractions. They're without Ime Udoka. Their coach obviously was involved in the scandal with the Celtics. He's suspended for the season. He is not going to be there. He was a huge reason why they got to the NBA Finals. So no Ime Udoka. However, they did add Malcolm Brogdon from the Milwaukee Bucks, from the Indiana Pacers, who is a great add to me. He is a point guard. I think he's going to be extremely valuable to the Celtics. A big reason why they can be successful, and I think he's even a sixth man of the year type player that could be really valuable. They still have Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, the reigning defensive player of the year, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford. The core of their team is coming back, just without their head coach, and Danilo Gallinari, who they tried to add, tore his ACL, so he is unavailable. Boston's still a very good team. Milwaukee Bucks, a lot of the same team. Of course, Giannis is back, the best player in basketball, in my opinion. Drew Holiday is back. They have Brook Lopez at center. Chris Middleton, he's injured again to start the year. That's the biggest concern for me with the Milwaukee Bucks. Bobby Portis is still here. George Hill, Grayson Allen, Patrick Connaughton. So Milwaukee still has that same core together. They obviously lost in Game 7 of the second round last year to the Celtics. I think if they are completely healthy, they get by the Celtics, they go to the NBA Finals, and they beat the Golden State Warriors. But again, that's not what happened. Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid, James Harden back in better health, better shape. good news there. They added PJ Tucker, who opted out in Miami. Tyrese Maxey, who looks like he's going to be a breakout star this year, very much could be the most improved player. They had Daniel House, Montrezl Harrell in the offseason. The Sixers look like a good roster. They look like a team that could contend. I like their team a lot. The one question for me is Doc Rivers is still the head coach, and I will have no faith in Doc Rivers in the postseason because he seems to lose every big series he's involved in. Brooklyn, KD, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, finally together. Kyrie is playing. There's no more vaccination status. There's no more of that craziness. Now, that does not mean that Kyrie Irving will be invested this entire season. That does not mean Kyrie Irving won't miss games because he has to go to an event or he has to go talk to people that think the earth is flat. But Kyrie Irving is in Brooklyn. Joe Harris is back healthy. He missed all last season. They re-signed Patty Mills. They added TJ Warren, who could be a great signing. TJ missed all last year in Indiana. He's missed 2 of the last 3 seasons in its entirety. But when he is available, he was a great productive guy for the Pacers. They traded for Royce O'Neal from the Utah Jazz, who will be a defender, which is something they need in Brooklyn. They still have Seth Curry, and Cam Thomas was the rookie last year who only continues to get better shooting the 3. Looking at this team, I think size is definitely a question mark for Brooklyn. Can they, they got with guys like Antetokounmpo, with Big Al Horford, and just the way Boston plays. But I think Brooklyn coming back is really an interesting team to watch early in the year, just the way they play basketball. The Miami Heat were the top seed in the Eastern Conference last year. They lost PJ Tucker. They re-signed Tyler Hero to a big deal. They still have a bad Duncan Robinson contract. Kyle Lowry's a year older. We'll see. Victor Oladipo. They brought back the same virtual team, yet it's just getting older. It's not as productive as it used to be. We'll see what happens in Miami. Other additions. Donovan Mitchell was traded from the Utah Jazz to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I like this pairing. Cleveland was a good team already with Evan Mobley, with Darius Garland. Now you add Donovan Mitchell to the mix with obviously their big center, who's a great player coming over from the Brooklyn Nets in Jared Allen. So I like Cleveland. I'm high on Cleveland. I think they're going to be a really good team this season. I think they're going to compete. Donovan Mitchell was a good add for them. Paolo Banchero goes to the Orlando Magic. He was the first overall pick in this year's draft. Looks like a stud. They already had Franz Wagner in Orlando. Jaden Ivey was drafted to the Detroit Pistons. He gets paired up. I like what they're doing in Detroit. And also DeJounte Murray was traded from the San Antonio Spurs to the Atlanta Hawks. So Atlanta now pairs 2 guards. You have DeJounte, you have Trae Young, and you got DeAndre Hunter. You have John Collins still on this roster. They couldn't trade him. So Atlanta, you still got the nucleus, but DeJounte is another guy who makes all-star games that is on your roster. And finally, Jalen Brunson left the Dallas Mavericks to join the New York Knickerbockers. I think the East is loaded. I think there's a lot of really good teams in the Eastern Conference, and I see it going this way. I have Boston winning the conference. Boston will win the I just think they're so deep. Yes, they're without the big man Robert Williams for most of the start of the season. He will return in the second half. But you got Al Horford, you got Grant. Tatum doesn't miss many games. Their big stars don't miss many games. And I think they're extremely motivated to prove to people that it wasn't just a fluke last year. And I think they'll want to win, Ime Udoka there or otherwise. I think they have something to prove this year. I like the Celtics. Second seed, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Why? Well, Embiid plays every game. I said the same thing. Embiid's finished runner-up in MVP voting the last 2 years. I think he's pissed off about that. I think he feels like he should at least won one of them over Nikola Jokic. I like the 76ers roster. I think Harden's going to have a bounce-back year. I'm not saying he's James Harden of all-star fame, but I think they'll be really good. PJ Tucker's a great add. He's a great defensive stopper. He can shoot the 3 from the corner. Tobias Harris, despite his inefficiencies, won't have to play. Tyrese Maxey will win Most Improved Player. This year, he might even make the All-Star team. Thibault's a great defensive player. House brings a lot of intent. They got a deep roster that even if Harden sits out a game, this team can beat teams. So I have Philly second. I have Milwaukee finishing third. Why? Chris Middleton. How many games is he going to play in? Pat Connaughton, how many games is he going to play in? I think they like to rest Giannis for the postseason. I could see that happening again. Brook Lopez will rest in games. He also missed over 50 games last year. I like Milwaukee a lot, but I think they got injury issues, and they approach the regular season different than I think a Boston will or a Philly who will look at home court. If Milwaukee can get a 3 seed where they have home court advantage, I think they'll be comfortable with that, and they'll take on whoever's in that 6 hole. 4, I have Brooklyn. A lot of the reasons I just said, I can't put them higher than 4th just because of their, who knows, Kevin Durant seems to get injured every year. Kyrie Irving is so damn flaky. Ben Simmons, who the hell knows with his mental state, but I think Brooklyn will be a contender in the East. They're good. 5 seed, I got Cleveland. Cleveland they're in the play-in last year and they got beat out. I don't think they'll be in that position this season. I think they're too good with Donovan Mitchell and that core. They will just squeak past the Raptors. The Raptors will be the 6th seed. They were the 6th seed last year. They will be the 6th seed again this year. So avoid the play-in round. Scotty Barnes will have a great second season. They added guys like Kem Birch, who's back with the team. They got some good. Fred VanVleet is still there. OG Anunoby. I think the Raptors are a really solid team. They're not better than the 5 I just named, but I think they are a good playoff team. They'll play Milwaukee. They'll give them their best in the first round. They're still developing. They're still looking for better players on this roster. Having Fred VanVleet as your second best player, to me, is not going to work at winning a championship. But I think they're still building something that can ultimately compete for a championship. It just isn't ready currently. But I like the Raptors. I do like the Raptors. Otto Porter Jr. was a really good signing. He won a championship with Golden State. He knows what it takes to do that. So Raptors will be good. Oddly enough, they got Cleveland to start the season tomorrow night. So that's a fun game in the NBA. 7 seed, I had the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat were the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference last year. This is my biggest what if. I see a big step back from both teams that did really well in their respective conferences last year. We'll get to the West in a minute. I just think the Heat's roster is old. I don't love their makeup. I don't think they have a whole lot of strength on this team. And a lot of those teams are better. They're getting old. They're going through a transition in Miami. I have them finishing 7th. They'll have to be in the play-in round. 8 seed Atlanta. Atlanta was the 8 seed last year. You get DeJounte Murray, you don't even improve. Why? Because the East is really good. Point blank. That's just how I look at it. You'll get the 8 seed. You'll have to battle in the play-in. And the 9 and 10 seeds, I have the New York Knicks, who will be a play-in team this year. They're still not a great team, but RJ Barrett is improving year over year. They got, obviously, Jalen Brunson to pair with him. They still have Julius Randle. They got Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks aren't a great team. Again, I have them finishing 9th or 10th in the Eastern Conference, but I think they're better than the bottom feeders. Indiana is going to be a terrible team this season. I don't think Washington's going to be very good, so there's 2 teams you can scrap out there, and you're battling with a few. I have them beating them out. And my other team is the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons, I like Jaden Ivey a lot. I think they've been grooming for this for a couple of years. You have Sadiq Bey. You got Dwayne Casey, who's been there a while, who I think will want to get to the postseason. I actually have the Pistons finishing 9th, the Knicks finishing 10th. Orlando, I think, will compete for one of those play-in spots. I don't think they'll just be an afterthought this year. You got Banchero, you got Franz Wagner. You got a roster full of guys that are young that are going to want to compete. But I think the Pistons are a little farther ahead than Orlando in that development. They'll make the play-in round. So Boston, Philly, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Cleveland, Toronto, Miami, Atlanta. I mentioned tank teams, and that's another storyline this season in the NBA. And it's a tank season for Victor Wembanyama, who's being described as the best prospect in the draft since LeBron James. 7'4" kid from France who can shoot the three, can block shots. He's basically a better Chet Holmgren. I got 5 teams who are openly tanking for this player. Washington, Indiana. Indiana needs to do more to tank, but they got Miles Turner, and they still have Miles Turner and Buddy Hield on their roster. I don't think either guy would be there long because they want to be in the sweepstakes. They want to try to turn around their franchise. Utah has done everything to get in this. They traded Rudy Gobert. They traded Royce O'Neal. They traded Donovan Mitchell. They traded Bogdanovich. They are openly saying, we suck. They got Will Hardy as their next head coach from the Boston Celtics. He signed on to a long-term deal knowing that this team is not going to be any good. They will win less than 20 games this year. There's had them being that bad, even though the West is a far easier conference than the East, in my opinion. They're that bad. San Antonio is another awful team. DeJounte Murray was traded, most part because they know they want to rebuild. Lonnie Walker is off that roster. They've gutted it. San Antonio and Utah are going to be, when they play each other, it's going to be who can make the least amount of shots. Why Greg Popovich is still coaching the San Antonio Spurs is beyond me, but he's still there and they're trying to rebuild for the future. Ugly year there for San Antonio. And I have Oklahoma City with a question mark. And the reason I say that is because Chet Holmgren's out for the season with Liz Frank foot injury. He had to have surgery. They still have SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from Canada. But if they know that they're not going to have Chet the whole season, why compete? What's the drive for this team? Why not get another high-end draft pick and see what you can do going into the 2023-2024 season? OKC will be better than the other two, but I think they'll be in the mix. But those 5 teams, Washington, Indiana, Utah in particular, San Antonio, and OKC, are all praying for Victor Wembanyama. And there's also this guard named Scoot Henderson, who is another really intriguing draft prospect. So this very much is an NBA season where you're tanking for a certain guy. We haven't seen it in a while in the NBA. Because there's so many college kids that you think are good, but you're not sure yet, and you like them. And there's been some really good drafts the last number of years in the NBA. But there's a different, or this is a McDavid type NBA prospect out on the table for these teams. Western Conference is different. Additions. Rudy Gobert was traded from the Utah Jazz to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota gave up everything and their mother for Rudy Gobert. He's now in Minnesota, and Chris Finch has a roster that he likes with Anthony Edwards. We'll talk about Minnesota in a bit. Patrick Beverley is now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. He joins the Lakers with his buddy Russell Westbrook as the Lakers try to turn around what last year was a disastrous year. I look as an addition, Zion Williamson is back with the New Orleans Pelicans. He did not play a game last year. He's back. He's healthy. I like New Orleans' team. We'll see what happens there. You got Keegan Murray, who was a 5th overall pick to the Sacramento Kings. Keegan Murray will likely win Rookie of the Year. There's an early prediction from me. I have Keegan Murray winning Rookie of the Year in Sacramento, just trying to turn around that franchise where they got Sabonis, you got some good players in Sacramento. Real threats in the West. Golden State, obviously. They just won the title. Clay is back. Wiggins is back, who just signed a long-term extension. Jordan Poole, who's just signed a long-term extension. Draymond Green, who's still waiting for one. Klay Thompson, DiVincenzo, Kevon Looney. They lost Gary Payton Jr. III, but the big X factor for this Warriors team, you have Jonathan Kuminga, who was a high draft pick, Mooney, James Wiseman, who went 2nd overall, who missed all last year. What kind of production can these young guys give you? They are X factors galore because they could be massive pieces. You make the playoffs again, they may play big minutes. What production they give you, I don't know, but they are integral to this team possibly repeating as NBA champions. The interest for Golden State this season, Draymond Green. Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins get long-term extensions before him. He gets in a fight with Jordan Poole in training camp. I think this is Draymond Green's last year in Golden State. They are not going to be paying over the luxury tax for Draymond after this gave those guys long-term extensions. Curry's locked up. Clay's locked up. How does he approach this final season in Golden State? The crowd loves him there. Curry and Clay love him. But can he be professional this season and win a 5th ring in Golden State before he leaves to go to the Lakers or go to the Knicks or wherever he wants to go? He has his podcast. If it's not going well, if things get a little touchy, I think we'll hear about it. So the Warriors might provide some drama this season in the NBA. Denver Nuggets. Denver is returning with a healthy roster. Jamal Murray did not play last year after tearing his ACL. Michael Porter Jr. is back healthy. Aaron Gordon is back healthy. They added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They added Bruce Brown in the offseason. They got Bones Highland. I like this Denver roster a lot, and it's health dependent. Jamal Murray is one of the great guards when available. Michael Porter Jr. was a great player coming up. Just hasn't been able to consistently stay healthy. Aaron Gordon is an intriguing player. Bruce Brown's a really good defender the last number of years on the Brooklyn Nets. I like Denver a lot. And it's just about their health and meshing together. But when they're all there together with Nikola Jokic running the show, the 2-time MVP, this team can be dangerous. The Los Angeles Clippers are finally together. Kawhi, Paul George, Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris Sr., Zubac, Terrence Mann, Robert Covington, Nick Batum, Kennard, Powell, and the biggest X factor, John Wall, who hasn't played the last 2 years. Been sitting on the bench in Houston, but John Wall was a first overall pick in the NBA way back when for the Washington Wizards. He's gone through a lot. He's talked about his depression, almost committing suicide. To me, he's a 6th man of the year contender for this team. I'd bring him off the bench to start the year, see what kind of production he can give you. To me, the Clippers have a really good roster on paper. It's about Kawhi. He's going to sit out games, of course. I think Paul George will rest games. I don't see this team being a regular season juggernaut because they'll sit out too many games. But I do see them being a threat come playoff time. Memphis, who was the 2nd seed in the West last year, brings back a similar group. Ja, Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones. This team is still really good in Memphis, led by Ja, who I think really wants the MVP award this season. Health dependent, of course. Memphis is really good. Dallas is a team that I don't think is going to be quite as good as they were last year. They made the conference final. They lose Jalen Brunson. They didn't really replace him. Tim Hardaway Jr. is back healthy. He's not as good as Brunson. They added JaVale McGee. I like that. But Finney-Smith, Kleber, Spencer Dinwiddie, this team is not as good as it was. They are a lesser team. And then you have the Lakers, who have LeBron, AD. They added Lonnie Walker Jr. the 4th. They added Pat Bev. Kendrick Nunn, who missed every game last year, is back. Austin Reeves and Russell Westbrook, who it looks like was going to come off the bench to start this year. Although he's injured, he might be unavailable tonight. Interesting year for the Lakers because LeBron James at some point this season will pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the leading scorer in the history of the NBA. So that'll be a milestone moment for the Lakers. I do think this roster has potential. I do think this roster has the opportunity to be really competitive and battle in the West because the West is more wide open than the East for me. I do think it's an old roster. I do think it's banking on LeBron being a superhero, Anthony Davis being healthy for a whole season, which is unlikely. It's got deficiencies, but I do think it's a tougher team than it used to be. How I think it shakes out. In the West, I have Denver winning the conference. Jokic, I think, wants it. I think this team is motivated. I got Denver winning. 2 seed, I got Memphis. They were 2nd seed last year. I think they're the 2nd seed again. I like Memphis a lot. To me, John Morant could easily win MVP. I like their roster. I still think they want to prove something to Golden State this year that they're not to be messed with. I have Memphis number 2. 3, I got the Golden State Warriors. Golden State number 3. Why? I think they'll play a lot of games. It's not. I think the Clippers I have 4th because I think the Clippers they're going to sit out too many. Kawhi will miss back-to-backs. They'll have games where they're sitting guys out, so that'll cost them. Clips 4th seed. 5th seed I had the Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves with a 7th seed last year. I had them finishing 5th, getting better. I still think the Gobert trade is crazy, but it'll help them a little bit in the regular season. They get to 5th. Anthony Edwards, my guy, only continues to get better. And they do have some pieces on this roster that I like. 6th seed, I had the Phoenix Suns. The Suns, who were the 1 seed in the West last year, they dipped just like the Heat. DeAndre Ayton is back, but Chris Paul's a year older. Devin Booker is still there. Jay Crowder looks like he's going to be traded at some point. I just think there's something bad going on in Phoenix the way it ended last year. I have them making the playoffs, but I have them getting significantly worse. 7th seed, I have New Orleans. New Orleans, I like New Orleans' roster a lot. Brandon Ingram's only continued to get better. Zion, I think, has a big season. Maybe he wins Comeback Player of the Year because he missed all last year. You got Josh Hart, who's a good passer, a good defender for New Orleans. I like New Orleans. Ross, I think it's a solid roster. I have them the 7th seed. I have the Lakers getting the 8th seed in the Western Conference. They didn't make the playoffs last year. I had to get them the 8th seed, squeaking in LeBron and the Lakers. I look at the last 3, they could be interchangeable. I just think New Orleans will be more consistent. They'll be more healthy. And I like Brandon Ingram in that group. And Willie Green, I think, is a better coach than Darvin Ham. And then the final 2 slots, I have the Dallas Mavericks, who are going to be a play-in team, even with Luka Doncic. I know it's crazy to think about, but I have them as a play-in team. I just don't think they have a whole lot of depth. They have 1 elite player and a bunch of ads. They don't even have a star player besides Luka, I don't believe. Dinwiddie is not. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not. Christian Wood is not. He's a reserve. He's a nice ad, but he's not a blockbuster signing. So I have Dallas squeaking in. I have the Sacramento Kings technically making the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. 25, I think over 25 years for Sacramento. I have them squeaking in over Portland as the final play-in team. Keegan Murray makes a big difference. You got Bertans there. Tyrese Halliburton was traded, which still kills me. But he's I like Sacramento's team. I think they'll have a productive season. I think they make the play-in. In the final, I got the Denver Nuggets. Meeting the Milwaukee Bucks. And I got Denver winning the NBA title. Milwaukee scares me with injuries, but I'm going to bank on Giannis, just how good he is. I like the Denver Nuggets roster. I like what they're building there, and they're healthy. Jokic finally has some help, and we'll see what they can do in the West with some help around him. I think Jamal Murray is a key part of that, obviously. Good Canadian boy. So that's the NBA thoughts to start the season. We'll talk more about NBA next week when Seamus is back. I'll get his thoughts early in the season. I'll get his predictions. So we'll talk about those next week. Who's he excited about? But tomorrow we got winners and losers on the show from week 6 in the NFL. We're going to recap the Panic-A-Rama game between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Vancouver Canucks. We'll talk about the other games in the National Hockey League. We'll recap the baseball games. We got NBA starting, Sixers, Celtics, Lakers, Golden State Warriors. So we'll discuss the start of the NBA season tonight. Everything is in full bloom. It's awesome. I love that it's all back. We got a huge UFC pay-per-view this weekend that I will preview later in the week, UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi. That's Saturday afternoon. Also talk some college football tomorrow if we can get some time to do that, because it was a huge weekend. Standings changed, and yeah, I got some thoughts on college football as well. But that's it for today. Hope you guys all enjoyed a great Tuesday. I'll be back with you all same time tomorrow. But until then, take care. This has been To The Point.